Niall Stanage is the associate editor and White House columnist at The Hill. He's joining us now from Washington. Now, Congress has 2 weeks to pass a spending bill when they return from recess. Can they actually do it? And what are some of the hurdles that they're going to have to overcome?
It's possible that they can do it. Would certainly be a political embarrassment for the Republican Party, in particular if they fail to do it, given that they control all the arms of government. One of the barriers, though, is that Republicans want to increase defence spending. Democrats want to exact a price for that, in the sense that they want some of their priorities. That could include a fix for DACA, the immigration program, but these things, by their nature, are difficult to reach a deal on because there's so many disparate opinions about them.
President Trump has also spent a lot of time lately tweeting about how the newly passed tax plan essentially repeals Obamacare, and nearly 8.8 million people signed up for the coverage this fall. And there's some new analysis that says 62% of those people live in states that the president won in 2016. Do you think that'll have an effect in the midterms and if the president runs for re-election in 2020?
I certainly think it will have an effect in the midterms. One of the most politically dangerous things to do is take an entitlement away from people, particularly after they have gotten used to it. We have seen the popularity of the Affordable Care Act increase ever since it has been under threat. The president isn't accurate in saying that it repeals Obamacare to just remove the mandate, but it is a little bit like a house of cards from which one card has been removed. It makes the overall structure weaker, and I think that's the danger, really.
The president also has tweeted that Democrats and Republicans are going to work together to replace Obamacare. Work together is not something you usually hear in Washington, D.C. Do you actually see this happening?
There are some moderate Republicans who have suggested measures to stabilise Obamacare. The leading voice on that is Susan Collins, the senator from Maine. She has shown a willingness to cross party lines, so it could happen. Again, though, the difficulty, Omar, is that on one hand you have a lot of Republicans who simply want the law repealed entirely, and Democrats, understandably, are not going to go along with something that repeals President Obama's signature domestic achievement.
The president does like talking about what he has passed or his legislative victories. Are there any issues that Democrats and Republicans can actually work on together?
Yeah, I do think that there are some issues that at least hold the opportunity for bipartisanship. Infrastructure spending is one of them. DACA, which we've already mentioned, there are in fact some Republicans who do want to strike a deal there. And one thing that hasn't got so much recognition or so much coverage, Omar, is that some Democrats from red states have shown a willingness to work to ease back some of the regulations that were part of the Dodd-Frank financial law. So that's another possibility for some degree of bipartisanship.
And what are some of the other legislative priorities for Republicans and, of course, the White House heading into the new year? And keep in mind, everybody's going to be watching what those issues are with the coming midterm elections.
So the first thing I'd say is, if you look at this year, you see the dangers of being overambitious with a legislative agenda, right? I mean, Republicans took control of a unified government thinking they were going to do all sorts of things. The attempt to repeal Obamacare failed. They got tax reform in December. So I don't think they want to be overly ambitious. They talk about things like entitlement reform. I'm very skeptical that would happen in an election year. So I think the focus is really going to be on some of the issues we've already mentioned, be that DACA, infrastructure, things of that nature.
And you also wrote a column for The Hill this morning discussing 5 Republicans who could possibly primary President Trump in 2020. You named Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse, New Mexico Governor Susana Martinez, Ohio Governor John Kasich, of course, 2 governors which are pretty popular when it comes to running, and an old foe for the president, Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Why these 5 Republicans? And let's be honest, how likely is it that you think they'll actually go against their party and against the president in 2020?
I do think it's almost certain that President Trump will get a primary challenge from someone. Now, I also think he'll be very difficult to beat in a Republican primary because, as I pointed out in my piece, his approval rating with Republicans is very high. 4 of those 5 people who you mentioned, everyone with the exception of Ted Cruz, hails from a more centrist tendency within the Republican Party. Centrists clearly have very big differences with President Trump, but centrism in the GOP is kind of weak right now. And that's why we included Ted Cruz as someone who could potentially potentially challenge President Trump from the right.
And it's going to be something that's going to be interesting to watch and, of course, for you, interesting to cover. Niall Stanage, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Omar.